and welcome to the Kink Perspective. My name's Chris. I'm a psychotherapist and consultant. Today, I want to get into something I see quite often, both in day-to-day life, inside of kink dynamics. Um, it's everywhere, right? And each week here we're getting into relationships and trauma and attachment styles. Sometimes we're looking at myths, right? But this one's going to be a little bit different because I want to dig into a pattern people beat themselves up over, even though it's usually not always their fault. Before I get into that, 201 episodes today, over 4 years of doing the Kink Perspective. I want to thank all of you who really do keep showing up, and the new listeners that have found the show, that are subscribing on YouTube and on Spotify and on Apple. This podcast keeps growing because you are listening, you're sharing it, and the conversations are being brought into your own lives. And what's really interesting about that, for a moment, is that when I take a look at this, when I look at this, and I wrote a post, and I want to say thank you. And normally I don't take this long on my intro to do all this, but I think it's really kind of important. And I appreciate everybody thanking me. But first of all, this is all you all. 2025, the Kink Perspective was a marathon show. That means thousands of people listening, thousands of people streaming. And this show wasn't just a streaming accomplishment. It was a talked about show. People commented. People were sharing their links and talking about it there. And the biggest part, people were sharing these episodes all over, from YouTube, Apple, on Spotify, over tens of thousands of shares. Thank you. Truly, thank you. Because to make this what it is, it takes you all. You got to show up every week. You want to listen. And I got a comment from somebody, and they just said, thank you for just kind of cutting through the noise. And, there's a bunch of colleagues I have, a bunch of people I talk to that are professionals, and I tell them that this is just an approach because it's about explaining how we feel and dealing with the situations, but in a language you all can understand. Because I've often found being too direct doesn't really help, or being direct helps, and being overly psychological doesn't help. That's what I meant. So I appreciate you all. Thank you. And as always, if you are on Spotify, if you're using the app, rate the show 5 stars. It's going to keep it growing. It's going to keep more people reaching conversations that they need to hear. If you're on YouTube or you prefer YouTube, head over, like, subscribe, hit that little button. Every week when a new episode's drop, you're going to get notified, right? And if you want to support the work a little bit more, there is a donation link in the show's description. All of that helps me keep this going. Now, let's talk about that moment people sit across from me and say, why do I keep doing this? And we all know these people, right? They'll say things like, I pushed them away even though I wanted them to be close. I wrecked the one thing that finally felt good to me. And every time things settle down, I freak out. These terms are very common. These sayings are very common. And I read about them on social media, and I read about them in research papers and all of these other things. Most folks were going to call this self-sabotage. They think they're weak or broken or screwing themselves over on purpose, but that's usually not what's going on. What I see over and over is something else entirely, a kind of learned defiance. It's a reflex that says, if I stay in control, I won't get blindsided again. Now, once you see that pattern for what it is, a lot of your past behaviors actually start to make sense. So, what is learned defiance? So when I talk about learned defiance, I'm not talking about someone being stubborn or impossible to work with. I'm talking about a reflex that forms slowly over the years, usually without the person even noticing. And it shows up the second someone tries to guide you, or help you, or even soften something in your life, before you even think, your body reacts with a quiet no. Sometimes it's a really loud one, right? Sometimes a cold pullback, sometimes a sudden change in tone. The behavior looks different from person to person, but the reflex underneath is the same. Now, it's not because you're difficult, it's not because you enjoy pushing people away. Most of the time, it comes out of experiences where letting someone close didn't end well. Now, maybe early in your life, being controlled meant being unsafe. Maybe accepting help meant you owed something you couldn't repay. So maybe being supported meant you were about to be dropped. And maybe being seen meant someone could use that information against you, right? And this is when you promise yourself you'd never feel that exposed again. So the body learns a rule here that feels really simple. Push back first. Stay free. Don't let anyone guide you, even if their intentions are good. Don't soften, because soft things get bent out of shape. Don't lean, because leaning leads towards collapse. So the rule starts to become automatic. You don't question it. You don't even notice it when it fires off for the beginning. Learned defiance isn't dramatic for most people. It shows up in smaller moments. Someone gives you advice and you feel your chest tighten before they even finish. A partner tries to reassure you and something inside of you snaps back internally. Like they're pulling on a line you didn't even give them permission to touch. And maybe a dominant or a submissive here tries to open a conversation that would bring more closeness or structure to the dynamic. And your instinct is just to turn away, change the subject, or even pick at something irrelevant to regain the upper hand. And I see this a lot. I see this in when I'm working with people, I see this in relational activities. You see this on social media all the time. It's not just about the argument, it's about that regaining of control. And it's not about wanting distance. It's because closeness feels like it costs something. And there is a price attached, even if the person in front of you never asked for anything. Now, what people call self sabotage is often just this reflex playing out. They think they're blowing up their own chances at a healthy connection or running from happiness, but really, they're following an old rule that kept them safe a long time ago. However, that rule doesn't fit your current life anymore. Now, the tricky part is that learned defiance can feel like independence. It can feel strong, like you're protecting you're protecting your identity or even maintaining your footing. And that's why people hold on to it. But the strength is deceptive. It's a strength built from fear, not from choice. So when you start to understand learn defiance, you begin to see how your reactions are patterned and they're not personal flaws. You begin to see why letting someone helps you, makes your stomach turn, or why receiving care, like is handing over the keys to your own stability. You start to recognize that pushback isn't anger or even stubbornness. It's a reflex from a time when pushing back was the only way you learned how to survive. And once you see that, you can start choosing something different. Now, how is learned defiance this? Why does it always get mistaken for self sabotage? When people talk to me or talk in general about self sabotage, they say it like it's a personality flaw. They wake up in the morning thinking, "Hey, how can I, nobody's going to wake up and say, how can I destroy my something in my life that's good today?" Right? That's Most people aren't saying that, but internally actually that's actually firing off. And I do hear or read this quite often. Someone sits across from me and says, "Hey, they blew up a relationship, or they pushed away a partner who cared, or they shut down the minute something started to feel steady, and they called it sabotage." Now, there are cases this is true. However, they take that as proof that something inside of them is defective. But what looks like sabotage is usually something else, something older, something that used to keep them safe. So, what they're really doing is defending themselves. Now, here's the part people don't understand: the body isn't trying to ruin anything, it's trying to stop a threat you learn to expect. And those threats live deep, and your nervous system just keeps activating as your defense mechanism because that's actually what it's built for, right? It doesn't want to lose autonomy. It's afraid of being hurt again, feeling small, feeling exposed, having to rely on someone who might walk away, or being disappointed in the same familiar way, right? I've been in relationships where, um, dating somebody and you're living together and you do something different, or you're trying to make their life easier, and it makes they go on the defense because they think that there's something attached to it, right? So it doesn't matter if the person in front of you is nothing like the people who hurt you. The body doesn't scan for fairness. It's looking for at patterns. It looks for the danger, right? It scans for anything that looks like the old story. So the moment something good starts forming, your system throws up the walls, not because you don't want the good thing, but because the good thing feels like it requires more trust than you have available to give. And a lot of people think that sabotage is a choice. It really is. It's a reflex you didn't even notice, right? And here's why: when this whole learned defiance comes in. If you grew up in a world where being controlled felt like suffocation, or needing someone meant that you were about to be dropped, and where every emotional opening was followed by a hit you didn't even see coming, your body learned a rule that still fires today. The rule is simple: stay in control, stay on your feet. You don't owe anyone anything, and you definitely don't need anyone more than they need you. So when you're living under that rule, even without knowing it, normal relationship moments feel threatening. A soft compliment can even feel suspicious. Someone offering support feels invasive. Someone trying to get closer, like they're, taking something from you, and this is what your body's telling you. So you push back, and it's automatic. And before your brain has even any time to catch up, before you even know why you feel irritated or defensive or even subtly cold, right? From the outside, it looks like sabotage, but from the inside, you feel safe. And that's why people ghost people who are good to them, or they refuse help when they're drowning, or reject compliments with some sort of weird sense of discomfort inside of them. Or maybe they just argue with their partner who's actually just trying to connect. Or the worst, they quit something before it starts to really work. And then they walk away from a relationship that was the calm they've always been looking for, right? They aren't trying to ruin anything. They're trying to stay free. They're trying to stay unhurt. They're trying to avoid feeling small again. They're trying to avoid being known in a way that once led to pain. So, what happens here? Defiance becomes your protection. Protection becomes a habit, and habit becomes identity. And people start saying, I guess I'm just the kind of person who can't do healthy relationships, or, I always ruin the good stuff. It's who I am. No, that's not true. That's not who you are. It's who they had to be, it's who you had to become. So once you understand that, that story is going to shift. You're not someone who can't hold on to good things. You're someone who never got to feel safe while holding them. You didn't learn sabotage, you learned how to survive. And survival has a long memory. Now, this is where the whole nervous system comes in, right? And here's the nervous system logic, right? If I ruin it, at least that's my decision. So that's what your nervous system is kind of running this script in the background, right? And this is the part people never say out loud. That thing that sits underneath so many breakups, so many blowups, and so many sudden withdrawals, right? There's this comfort in ending something before it can hurt you. Now, it feels awful, but it also, guess what, feels controlled. Now, for a lot of people, especially those in the lifestyle, control has been the one steady anchor they've trusted their whole life. When someone carries a trauma history into a relationship or a dynamic, their nervous system becomes very good at anticipating loss. It watches the emotional weather, right? It listens for tonal shifts. It looks for signs that someone might be pulling away, even if that person isn't, right? It's giving you a false positive. And the body starts whispering that whole survival line that you've been running on forever. If I ruin this first, at least it won't Surprise me. That isn't sabotage, it's protection. Protection learned in the worst classrooms on this planet. This is a psychological core of the whole pattern. Self sabotage is rarely about destroying something, it's about staying in control. Control feels safer than hope. Hope asks you to trust a future you can't predict. Hope asks you to be soft, to be open, to take someone at their word. And for someone who's lived through inconsistency or betrayal or emotional instability, that level of trust feels like handing over every tool you use to keep yourself steady. And here's where relationships and kink overlap in a powerful way. In the lifestyle, people talk about giving power or holding power or even exchanging power. But underneath that language is something more fragile: vulnerability. Submission is vulnerable. Dominance is vulnerable. Intimacy in kink is often rawer than intimacy in vanilla relationships because both people step into roles that require trust to make sense. And when trust is the trigger point, defiance can show up really fast. Now, submissive here might pull away when they're finally dropping, or dominant might shut down the moment they feel their partner's leaning on them emotionally. Someone might ignore the rules they actually want to follow, or about a protocol they once found comforting, or even sabotage a scene or cancel a session with no explanation. Now, none of it comes from a lack of desire, it comes from fear of needing the connection too much. The logic is simple here. If I stay in control, I can't be left. So, if I end it on my terms, I won't relive the helplessness I grew up with. And if I create that distance, I'm going to feel stable again. And this is where the nervous system hijacks the whole damn thing. It can't tell the difference between healthy vulnerability and the old danger. So when a partner gets close or the dynamic gets deeper, the rules start to feel real. So your body reacts, right? Your chest gets tight, blood pressure goes up, you start to feel warm, you got restless energy, you've got a lot of irritability, right? A feeling like something bad is about to happen. So the person does what they've always done to survive. They pull away, they poke at the relationship, they create tension, and they break the dynamic before it can break them. And again, it looks like sabotage from the outside, but on the inside, it feels like relief. And here's the hardest truth to sit with all of that. The strategy here makes perfect sense for the world, you know, someone came from. It doesn't just match the world they're trying to build now. So, with partners or dynamics who actually want to be a part of it, they can't separate the two. So, if you can start to recognize the difference, that becomes the first moment things can change for you. So, how does this all show up in relationships? Now that we've kind of walked through the internal mechanics, let's talk about how learned defiance actually shows up between two people. Because it almost never comes in loud, right? It's not some fanfare, there's not a band or a parade, right? It doesn't announce itself. It comes in sideways and in these really small moments that feel confusing or frustrating or even completely out of character. People don't even realize what they're doing until the damage is done. And even then, they'll swear it wasn't intentional. And it wasn't. One of the most common ways it shows up in intimacy, is when that starts to land, things that feel good. Now, maybe they've been good for a little while. So your partner is going to soften a little bit. They settle in, they relax towards you, right? And that should feel really nice. But for someone carrying that reflex, it's going to set off all sorts of alarm bells. They're too close, too warm, too steady. So instead of leaning in, that person's going to pick a fight. And they're going to start with something small, something so pointless that later they'll say, I don't even know why I started that. But in that moment, the fight creates distance, and distance feels safer. And I want you to think about that for a moment. I'm going to repeat that line. Distance feels safer. You start to understand if you're doing this and you can relate to that, right? Now, another place this shows up is when, a partner tells you, hey, you know what? I really care about you, or you matter to me. Now, for most people, that's comforting. We're living for that moment. But for someone that's wired toward learned defiance, that's a pressure point. Being cared for starts a whole chain reaction of fears. What if this doesn't last? What if the other person changes their mind? What if being cared for means now I'm going to owe you something? So we start to spiral, and your nervous system clamps down faster than, a train barreling down down the track. Your emotions shut off, the person goes quiet, or they even pull away, not because they didn't want to hear it, but because the words required trust, and they weren't ready to give that yet. Or here's another favorite variation I hear on occasion, or definitely read about all the time. Your partner's going to come up and ask you, what do you need? And suddenly you can't answer, not because you don't know, but because expressing a need feels like handing them some leverage on you. So learn defiance tells you that needing anyone's a risk. So you're going to do what? You're going to withdraw. You change the subject. You tell them you're fine, even when you're not. And the other person is left wondering why you won't let them show up for you. And every time I hear when I'm talking to someone, I'm fine, I point out that fine stands for freaked out, insecure, neurotic, or emotional, right? It's the shortest way. Those two words, right, are the shortest phrase to know something's wrong. Now, there's this other whole thing called the chaos pattern. Calm relationships feel unfamiliar. Predictable dynamics feel suspicious. So the person subconsciously creates chaos. Overstimulate, overthink, overreact. They test the stability until it cracks just so they can relax again. And I know that sounds backwards, but for someone used to all that turbulence in their life, calm is actually discomfort, right? A lot of people also test love without even trying to. They poke and they push and pull just to see if the other person's going to stay because they want reassurance, but the way they reach for it ends up exhausting their partner. They need proof, not because they doubt the other person, but because they doubt that anything good can last for them. And then there's my favorite, refusal of help. Even when you're drowning, that one gets misinterpreted a lot. Partners think that, it's pride or ego or even stubbornness. It's not. It's the fear that accepting any type of help means losing your autonomy, or worse, that the help will be taken away later and that the loss is going to hurt more than refusing it in the first place. None of this is manipulation. None of it is game playing. None of it is malicious. These behaviors came from a place where safety meant staying in control, where vulnerability carried a price, where closeness was something you had to brace for, not relax into. So when you look at it through that lens, the behaviors stop looking like sabotage. They start looking like someone trying to protect themselves in the only way they've ever learned. And I even see this show up in other places. It doesn't just appear magically in relationships, it shows up in places where people are trying to grow. And that part always surprises them. I've seen it over and over in my own work, right? Someone comes in, they want change, they want relief, they want something to shift. And the minute the work starts to move in that direction, that whole reflex kicks in, not because they don't care, not because they're unmotivated, because their system doesn't trust the process. So I actually have to sit. It might sound ridiculous, but let me tell you, when I tell people I'm going to talk to their nervous system, it's about reassurance, right? But for a lot of these people that show up and they're doing this, and if you listen to other therapists, they're going to tell you all the same thing. Their clients, they won't do the homework, even if they're meant to. They leave sessions thinking, hey, this week I'm actually going to try, and then something inside of you pulls back, and the moment the task asks for any type of openness or emotional effort, that old rule comes in and says, no way, not a chance, not safe, not now. Well, the best part or the fun one for me, they challenge everything as, every intervention. It's not about arrogance, but because trusting someone else's guidance feels like letting go of that control that's kept everybody steady, right? They test it, they poke it, they find flaws in it, and they do anything to avoid leaning on someone else's structure. And I see that. Now, for someone like me, that's really, I see it. It's hard, especially I see it when I work with veterans a lot because they've learned how to stand on their own. They have learned how it is to work in a team, but this isn't a team setting, right? We're not co facilitating here. One person leads, the other person follows. And for some, that's very difficult to do, right? So along the way, they're going to minimize their own progress. They finally make headway in an area they've struggled for years. And then guess what? Boom, that reflex comes right back in. Don't get ahead of yourself. Don't trust it. And then they knock their own movement down before anyone else can. Breakthrough moments get avoided in the exact same way. You say something that lands and you can see it hit them. And I see this quite often. And instead of staying in that moment, they jump to a new topic or they make a joke or shut down. We typically call this deflection, right? The vulnerability of that insight is way too raw, way too exposing. So your system covers it immediately. There's also the version where someone attends every session but stays emotionally offline. They're present, but they're not really present. Talking, but they're not connecting. So they're trying to grow while keeping every door locked at the same time. And of course, there's the classic line, this won't work. Right? They'll tell me that before work even begins, not because they truly believe it, but because believing it, that the work, if it might work, it's going to feel riskier than believing it won't. Now, again, none of this is resistance in the way people think. It becomes survival. It's all about that. It's the same reflex that shows up in the relationships or friendships or family circles, just wearing different clothes. The body doesn't care whether the person in front of you is a partner, a therapist, or a priest. It only cares about protecting you in the way it learned to do a long time ago. And becomes this paradox. I want the connection, but I need to control more. And this is where learned defiance really takes shape. People think they're complicated or inconsistent, but you're not. They're carrying two very real instincts that fight each other every time something meaningful shows up. On one side, you want closeness and they want someone who gets you. I want someone who's going to understand me. I want the warmth, the steadiness, the feeling of not having to walk through life alone. They want a partner, a dynamic, or a place where they can just set the weight down for a minute and just feel some peace. But guess what? The moment that gets close, the other instinct kicks in. That one, that's the one. Geez, and it says, you know what? Be careful. If you lean too hard, you're going to lose control. And control, for a lot of people, has been their only form of safety. Control meant you didn't get blindsided. Control meant no one could flip the table on you again. Control meant you stayed aware, ahead, and most of all, armored. So the tension here, it builds. You want help, but the idea of relying on someone feels risky. You want to heal, but change forces you out of the defenses that kept you standing. You want love, but being seen makes you feel exposed in ways you can't predict. And you want safety, but you're scared that if you soften too much, you'll lose the edge that protected you for years. People say they're torn, but it's deeper than that. It's like the nervous system keeps score. It remembers what happens the last time you trusted too quickly. It remembers who left. It remembers the moment someone used your vulnerability against you. And it remembers how long it took you to put yourself back together. So even when a connection is right in front of you, control still wins. Not because it makes you happy, but because it makes you feel prepared. And that's the paradox. You want the very thing your system learned to defend against. And the truth is, nothing shifts until this pattern is named. You can't fight something you don't know is there or you can't recognize. You can't choose closeness until you understand why control keeps stepping in first. So, what breaks the cycle? When people talk about breaking patterns, they usually imagine some big moment where everything changes, a breakthrough, some sort of choice, or some pivot to a new self identity. But learned defiance doesn't dissolve like that at all. It's not a switch you just flip on and off, it's a reflex that loosens slowly. The way old habits loosen when the body finally realizes it doesn't need them in the same way anymore. The first real shift comes from slowing down the emotional pace, not just slamming on the brakes, not forcing yourself to be vulnerable, just slowing the moment down enough so you can tell the difference between what's actually happening and what your nervous system thinks is happening. Most people with learned defiance react fast because reacting fast kept you safe. Slowing down lets the truth come into focus. Naming the reflex helps as well. Not blame, not as a diagnosis, just an honest label. This isn't sabotage, it's protection. Something in the body settles when we hear that. The shame can move out the way, right? Gets out of there. You can start seeing the pattern without feeling attacked by it. And another part of the shift comes from separating autonomy from rebellion. A lot of people grew up equating independence with pushing back. It felt like the only way to stay alive. So when someone offers support or connection, it automatically feels like an intrusion. Untangling those two things, autonomy and rebellion, opens a space for connection that doesn't feel suffocating. There's also the unfamiliar, experience of accepting help without feeling owned by it. Now that takes time. There was somebody I was working with that it took them years to do that because they always felt they had to repay it. So it started with something small, asking a coworker for a piece of chocolate and just saying thank you and walking away, not repaying it, not nothing. Now, for a lot of you, even hearing that, that is going to make your chest tighten, right? Oh my God, I've got to repay it. They're going to have something on me. I'm going to owe them something. Well, if there's a bunch of chocolates on the desk for you to take, you don't owe them anything. They are for everybody. They're being nice, just giving them away. No, 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 I've got to pay them back. No, you don't. When I worked with that person on that, I don't know, 4, 6 weeks for their body just to settle. Now it's something they do a little bit more frequently. It's still, the reflex is still there a little bit, but it's not as strong. The voice isn't as loud anymore, right? Letting someone show up in small ways without turning it into a debate or a threat rewrites the nervous system slowly. And you've got to go slow because if you do this, it teaches the body that receiving doesn't mean surrendering any power. And then there's this whole quiet, uncomfortable work of building tolerance for good things. Now, most people think they'll slide easily into stability or affection once they find it. They won't. Good things feel foreign at first, even sometimes dangerous. But staying present with them a little longer each time teaches your system that not every soft moment is a setup. And a lot of people have to learn how to receive instead of defend. And I know that sounds simple, right? But it's one of the hardest things to do. Receiving requires a little openness, defending requires none. And openness is where the fear always lives. Eventually, something shifts, right? Control here stops being a shield and starts becoming a choice, not a panic response, not a default setting anymore, a choice. And you keep it when you need it, and you loosen your grip when you don't. That's when learned defiance stops running the show. You don't fix this reflex. You unlearn the belief that control is the only safe way to exist. And once that belief starts to soften, everything else follows. Now, as we wind this one down today, I want to bring back the focus to the real tension underneath everything we've talked about. the place where the connection and control keep pulling at each other. Learn defiance doesn't make you a difficult person. It doesn't mean you're incapable of love or closeness. It's not true at all. It does mean, though, there was a time in your life where control kept you steady and your body just doesn't forget that lesson. So, what changes things isn't force, it's recognition. Noticing those moments when you're bracing, the moments where you pull right, you pull back right when something starts to feel good. And those moments where you choose safety, even part of you is starving for the connection. Those are the places where the story starts to shift, not because you're pushing yourself, right? But because you understand yourself a little bit better. The real work doesn't happen in sessions or scenes or big declarations. It happens in tiny pauses. The breath before you react a second, that thought shows up right after that reflex. I mean, even that quiet awareness that might, maybe danger you're bracing for isn't actually in the room anymore. That's where this episode keeps living, in those small, barely visible choices. There's no finish line here. There's no version of you that never flinches or never pushes away. What you're learning is how to let control be something you choose instead of something you grip, and how you let connection be something you consider instead of something you fear. And that's slow, steady work. The kind of work that changes the feel of your life long before it changes the structure of it. So, I'm going to leave you all with a question that none of you ever answer, or very rarely any of you answer. But I'm going to do it anyways because I do it every week. And for all of you around the world that listen and ask, I'm going to keep asking. And I'd like to, you know what? I'm going to say this. This week, I want at least 20 of you to either email me responses or comment on social media about my question I'm about to ask you. All right? That's what I'm putting forth. I'm putting this out there. I want to see you all get a little bit more involved. I know you're there. I know you're listening. I know this is helping. Don't be afraid to let others see you, right? Because it's a form of control. Because tell you what, you share your story and it helps others feel like they're not alone, right? So here's the question. Here's the posit I have for you all, right? A little academia for you. When you pull back from closeness, are you protecting yourself from the other person or from the version of you that once had no say? That's the question this week. I will put it up. It'll be on the socials for you, right? It'll be up there. Couple things I want to get to. I did get some random questions I want to address. I've got actually the same question about 4 times, so I'm just going to do it on air today real quick. Yes, I am on YouTube. I have started backing out of some of my other podcast places because, quite honestly, there's so many, and I don't feel like I own them. I just don't feel like constantly updating them. So Amazon, well, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Amazon, and a few others, iHeartRadio. Those are my bigger ones. Um, and then, yeah, that's kind of, there are a few other ones I'm doing, but I'm still not trying to put it up there. I realize in different countries, you struggle to get different things. If you can't get in one of those and you're struggling to find the show, but you're catching it on, YouTube because your net goes down or blackouts or whatever, let me know. We can try to find you another place. All right. I'll try to help you out there. Ah, I thought I would escape this week, but without you're famous now. But no, we have Penny the Pusher this week. Penny decided to show up on my writing. And this seems like a common theme. I write something. First off, when any psychologist or clinician or counselor or psychiatrist writes something, they're more so describing stuff, right? They might even give some examples. What they're not doing for the most part, they're not going to tell you how to treat it. There's a reason we don't at all, because we can't, right? Not allowed to. So I make this kind of clear on my profiles. I can't do that in my AMA responses. If you ask me like certain questions that are fishing for guidance, I can't do it, right? Got to respect the space. However, I read something this past week and I was like yesterday or the day before, and somebody, I was talking about trauma and relationships and how it shows up inside. I'm like I always do. I can talk about trauma forever. So this person came in and started telling me what I should have said in my writing, misinterpreted it. Well, I very calmly, clearly explained. I understand what they were saying, but that's not what I'm doing. And I'm not giving you therapeutic guidance. It's not how this works. I don't do that. Then she came back again, fired, double down. I was very calm about it. And then she tripled down. Chris wasn't so calm about it anymore. And let me be very clear, I'm still a human being, so I still get annoyed, right? If you start projecting, and then the fourth comment is why she's famous now, because Penny the Pusher just couldn't stop and started telling me that I love when I hear this, you're a danger and you're responsible if people read this and are harmed. No, I'm not. If you are struggling and you read any article or any book in the world and you interpret that in your own way, the author is not responsible for you, how you take it. It's not a slight against you. What I find ironic is telling me that I don't understand trauma. I've lived with my own. I have worked, I have studied under, and I respect and follow the work of some of the best trauma experts in the world who've all lived through their own trauma in one form or another, right? So to tell me I don't get it, to tell me that I am, I shouldn't be, Lord, I so much so that I really wanted to ban her, but I deleted her comment. And if she comes back again, she's gonna get banned. Now she hasn't. I have I have a day policy, like how many days if you come back and start insulting me, I'll delete your comment, but if you keep firing away, you get banned. Right? But projection here, it becomes the same thing. We're coming to the holidays. I'm sorry if you're struggling. You seem to have someone close. Lean into them. Go enjoy the holidays. I know it might be a little bit of a struggle. I get that. Families aren't the greatest around the holidays. Find some happiness. Go put up some Christmas trees. If you don't believe in Christmas, I don't know what to tell you. Start Festivus, right? And do your airing of the grievances. I don't know. Watch some Seinfeld. You'll understand that reference, right? Plenty of other holidays to choose from. I am not here to support every person that comes across me. I'm not. And if you're going to argue with me, you take away from the people I want to help who are responding very well, Penny. I don't like that. So you're famous now and you're on notice. If you keep doing that, you're not going to be allowed to partake in the wisdom I drop on everybody. By the way, I do it for free. Like you then send me an email saying I don't do it. What is it with you people and telling me I don't do enough? It just blows my mind. I don't do enough. Chris, you don't do enough. You know what? And every time I tell you all that and I get all the thank yous for your support, I know, I appreciate it. I read them all and I agree. And I started talking to a friend of mine and I asked her, I said, I understand weirdly celebrities now. I get it. I still think they're arrogant and pompous. And for the most part, most of them are idiots. But the reality is that why do they focus on the negative comments, not the good ones that make them, that are people are saying, hey, I'm touched. Thank you for doing this. Because it is we want to help, right? I want to help. I do this for free. I've got all these worksheets out there for you all for free. I just want you to, I don't even want you to get taken by all these con artists that are inside of the community that are charging you exorbitant fees. I'm not saying they shouldn't be paid to do work. I'm not saying that. But if you're going to write a version of consent for 38 different people, right? And charge on the upwards of 75 or $100 for that? No, I'm sorry. You're ripping off the community. And I said this earlier at the beginning of this year. The people that are stealing from this community are somewhere in probably the tens of millions of dollars every year. There's a really big one out of the state of Washington. And they're just, to me, a bunch of con artists. I don't really care. I won't name them, but I've read their stuff and it's a joke. Right? I'm gonna veer off. I'm veering too much. See what you did to me, Penny? Damn pusher. Anyway, yes. Heading towards the end of the year. 2 episodes left, guys. 2. Right? Next week I'm gonna be recording with a forensic psychologist. I gotta sit down with her and find out. I'm really super excited. I get to geek out a little bit on that one. There's gonna be some geeking out. Got a good subject for you all. That'll be up until the week of Christmas for you all. And then I'm gonna be shutting down. Christmas, New Year's. I'll be back in the new year. I don't know when. Probably maybe the week of the 7th. I don't know. Might start a little late, but who knows? Might start the week after. We'll see. Right? We're going to see. Anyway, no book promos, no nothing. Look. All right. Take away what you need from this episode. I really want you to, because there is all of the stuff that's going on that we get worried about that happens inside of us. We don't understand it. So for some of you, this is going to be more eye-opening today, and I really hope it is for you. And don't forget my question. And I want at least 20 of you to answer it, right? I don't care if you answer it in whatever language: Arabic, Czech, Polish, French, German, English, don't care. Spanish, don't care. I want you to answer it. I've got too much social media. Don't tell me you can't do it. And if you're nervous, email it to me and I'll at least read it, right? We're going to get into that next week. I got some other stuff I want to start talking about. Yeah, right? Here it is one more time. When you pull back from closeness, are you protecting yourself from the other person or the version of you that once had no say? Because there is a difference. And noticing that difference might be the quiet beginning of something new. Until next time, everybody, be safe and stay kinky.